This is Miss Fazone back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about solving one-step linear equations. Alright, so the first question I want to ask are, what are the four operations we use when we do math? So the first one in first grade we usually learn is, I just think I had put something there, adding. And then after adding, we always do the opposite of that, which is subtracting. And then around, third grade or so, we start to learn multiplying, which is just repeated addition. And then lastly, of course, we do the opposite of multiplying, which is dividing. So when we solve an equation, one of the things we have to think about is what's going on between our coefficients, our numbers, our constants, and our variable. So we have our numbers and we have our variables. What are they doing to each other? Are they adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing? Alright, so pause the video. I want you to try each of these problems and just write down, what are they doing? What is the operation between them? Are they adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing? So number one should be obvious. What is that symbol you see? That's a plus, so these are adding. Number two. Now this one tends to mess kids up after sometimes. That -5 and the x, when they're touching like that, that means multiplication. They are multiplying -5 times x. That line, this looks like a fraction. Fractions and division are the same thing. So these are dividing. X minus 8, I see that subtraction. Again, when a number and a letter are touching, that means they're multiplying. And lastly, this one, there's multiple answers that you could say here. Typically, like there's a line, so it's dividing, but it's also multiplication because it's 9 times x. One way of rewriting this is 9 over 13x. So I would say this is multiplication also. You can also think of it as dividing by 13, it's division and multiplication at the same time. Alright? So that's important to know before we solve an equation. We have to be able to recognize what's happening between each of these terms. Alright. Is that right? No, I didn't skip. Alright, so number 7. So we're going to solve for x. So the whole idea here is we want to get x by itself. X has stuff on the same side of the equal sign as and it doesn't want anything next to it. We want to get it by itself. We want to figure out what does x represent. Now a lot of students complain, they say, well, I can just do that in my head. I know it's 4 because 4 plus 9 is 13. And that's fabulous. However, one thing that it is important to show your work, because as solving equations gets more complicated, you can't necessarily figure it out in your head. So at this point, it's really about showing the work to make sure that you know the process so that those more difficult problems come easier to you. So for here, what we're going to do, look at what's happening between x and that other number on the same side of the equal sign. X plus 9. So it's a plus 9, they're adding. So we're going to use the inverse. What's the inverse or opposite of adding 9? Subtracting 9. So these are opposites or inverses. Plus 9 minus 9 cancels that to 0. So we can just draw a line through that. We're left with x equals, and then 13 minus 9 is 4. And we're done. And again, it was pretty easy to think 4 plus 9 is 13. This is the process you need to be able to follow though. Alright, number 8. what is happening between x and the other number in that equation. X minus 7. So this time we have a minus 7 that we need to get rid of. The opposite of subtracting 7 is adding 7. So where I see that minus, I'm going to put plus. Plus 7, plus 7. Minus 7 plus 7 cancels to 0. We draw a line to show it's canceling to 0. X equals negative 3 plus 7, we're using those integer rules, is 4 also. And you can easily plug in 4 minus 7 is negative 3. Alright, now this one can be deceiving. Some students see the plus, so they think, oh, I need to minus 8. But notice, if I put minus 8 here and here, does negative 8 and negative 8 cancel out to 0? It doesn't. This looks like an addition problem. It's actually a subtraction problem because the 8 is negative. The inverse of a negative is a positive. So we need to be making sure to add 8 to both sides. Negative 8 plus 8 cancels. We bring down our x. Negative 17 plus 8 is negative 9. Last one. Now, the reason I gave you this one, notice, it's really common to see equations like this, but reversing it doesn't do anything. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter which side of the equation x is on. So again, I'm looking at the side that has the x. What's x and the other number doing? They are subtracting. The opposite of subtracting is adding. Minus 6 plus 6 is 0, cancels out. X equals 6 plus 6 is 12. Now some people don't like that. It's an equal sign, which means both sides are the same. So if you want to write it x equals 12, go for it. They're the same thing, doesn't matter. So this is solving one step with adding and subtracting. Now let's try multiplying and dividing. Alright, number 11. 8x equals 16. So look at x has that 8 with it. So what does 8x mean? It means 8 times x. So these are multiplying. What's the inverse or opposite of multiplying? Dividing. So we're going to divide both sides by 8. What is 8 divided by 8? 1. So in this case, we're actually canceling to 1. So some students, it makes them feel better. They can write 1x. You can do that if you want, or you could just write x. It's the same thing. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Done. Pause the video, try number 12 on your own. So yet again, we have 7x, which means 7 times x. The inverse or opposite of multiplication is division. When I see multiplication, I know I have to do the opposite. So I'm going to divide both sides by 7. Those 7's cancel out to 1. X equals negative 28 divided by 7 is negative 4. Done. Alright, division. These tend to be a little more complicated. These students have a little more trouble with these. So instead of going down, we tend to go like out with these just to make our life a little easier. I'm actually going to rewrite it. X over 4 equals negative 11. So just like the others, my question was, what is x and that other number doing? In this case, we have that line, they're dividing. What's the opposite of dividing? Multiplying. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4. Now if it helps, think of it as 4 over 1. When you have fractions multiplying, the top and the bottom number can cancel out. So we're just left with x. And then negative 11 times 4 is negative 44. And that makes sense. Think about it. Negative 44 divided by 4 is negative 11. Alright, last one. on this slide. Wasn't that easy? So just like before, we're going to go, we have this weird fractional coefficient. This one's a little odd because it's a fraction. There's a bunch of ways to do this. I'm going to go over multiplying by the reciprocal. Whenever you want to get rid of a fraction, the easiest way to do it is to multiply by its reciprocal. So we're going to multiply by 5 over 2. Remember, the reciprocal is when you take your fraction and you flip it. So times 5 over 2. Because when we do that, this 2 cancels with this 2, this 5 cancels with that 5. So we're just left with x. Over here, put that over 1. Multiply our numerators, that's 80 over 2, which then equals 40. And if it helps over here, we could have multiplied the top, multiplied the bottom. So that's 2 times 5 is 10 over 10. So it's really 10x over 10, which goes to x anyways. Okay. So that is your one step. Alright, last set of 4. Pause the video, try these on your own. So for number 15, think about what is happening between x and the other number on the same side of the equal sign. Some students try to move that 12. No, the whole idea is we want this x to be all by itself. We don't want anything else with it because we want to figure out what it equals. So what's near it? That 8. It's a positive 8. Opposite of plus is minus. So we subtract 8. 8's cancel to 0. X equals negative 20. Number 16. What is the x and that 3 doing? They're the ones on the same side. They are dividing. Opposite of dividing is multiplying. Times 3 times 3. Those 3's cancel out because it's really 3 over 1. X equals 3 times negative 22 is negative 66. Negative 2 plus x. Look at the side that has the x. What are these numbers doing? That's a minus in front of the 2. The opposite of minus is plus. So we're going to add 2 to both sides. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So x is now alone. Negative 19 plus 2 is negative 17. Last one. We have 27 equals negative 9 over x. So look for your x. What's on the same side? We have that negative 9. Remember, negative 9x means negative 9 times x. These are multiplying. The inverse or opposite of multiplying is dividing. Now when you divide, don't forget that negative, if you had just put 9, that would be wrong. We're dividing by the entire coefficient. X equals 27 divided by negative 9 is negative 3. And that is solving a one-step equation. Hope this was helpful. Have a great day.